Hey folks, welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio, where we are enjoying ourselves with lots of conversations on the Beatles. We do one-on-one interviews here, we do panel discussions, we even have trivia games here on the Beatles, most recently that I've been enjoying. And not that long ago, we did a little sneak peek at a book that has just come out called Paul McCartney, Music is Ideas, the stories behind the songs. This is volume one from 1970 through 1989. It's written by Luca Perasi, and we welcome Luca back to the channel.
Hi, Ken. Thanks a lot for another episode with you. So looking forward to spend the next hour or so with you.
Yeah. Because I read several books at the same time, I haven't had a chance to finish the whole book, but I've read half of it so far. So I thought what we could do here in this interview is just talk about the first decade that's covered, and that, of course, is the 70s from 1970 through 79. And I must start by saying how much I'm really enjoying the book because I feel like this is an essential reference book to find that information about every single song where it's available. But not only that, as someone who's been enjoying the McCartney Legacy book, and as you know, my colleague Alan Kozin is one of the co-authors of that with Adrian Sinclair. That's an amazing book too. It takes you on a day-by-day course of what was going on with Paul McCartney, much like what Mark Lewison does. What you do here is you have everything listed by song, everything that Paul has released, some things that he hasn't released, but it's all broken down by information with each song, as far as when it was recorded, the very beginning of the recordings. If it's just a backing track, you have the date for that. You have the recording studio it was recorded, and if it was picked up on later on, whether a week or a month or a year later, then you have the information for that. But it's all listed by song, and it's a lot easier for some people to learn about these songs when it's presented in that format. So I commend you for all the work that you put into this. I mean, everything you'd want to know up to this point that we can find out about all of Paul's material is right here in this book, and in a very easy way to read it.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the overview and sum up of the book. Well, the main thing I think is that now we are in 2023, and I think this is the only book out there which lists all Paul McCartney songs one by one. So the classic song by song book. Well, there's nothing else. Well, the McCartney Legacy is a different approach.
Right.
It's more towards biography, although it goes in depth into the musical side. This is strictly musical, strictly about the songs, about the albums, the singles. A choice that I've made of including 50 unreleased songs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's it's about time to having a book like that on the market. Well, because my aim is that okay, let's pretend that we are in a, well, what will happen in, I don't know, 10 to 20 years? This kind of books remain and are available, and anyone that wants to know about Paul McCartney songs without going on the net and searching here and there, have a book. You can have one source, and knowing the main facts about his compositions. And when we talk about Paul McCartney, who is the best composer ever, my opinion, this kind of book is really worth having.
It's worth having an in-depth study. And even though the internet is invaluable in many ways, I doubt if you're going to have something as in depth, song by song, in Paul's catalog as what you're doing here with your books.
Yeah, obviously the net is an incredible source, and I have used for a lot of researches I have made. In the end, the other thing which is important when you do this kind of books and this kind of works is that you get to harmonize all the sources, choose the best ones.
Mm.
Tell you the truth, I got to cut something like 30 to 50 pages to have this book. I could have done something way longer, but it would have been, I think, not readable, not manageable. You have to do some choices. So, and it's still quite a long book, quite detailed and stuff. So at some point we got to cut some text here and there. But anyway, I think it's a complete overview if you want to know what happened after the Beatles in this first 20 years. You got a good overview.
Yeah, and your book is loaded with footnotes for where you got all this information. Obviously, the McCartney Legacy has been used. Paul's lyrics books have been used, and lots of interesting articles.
Yeah,
a lot to draw from, and your own research yourself, because you've done quite a number of interviews in preparation for this.
Yeah, I mean, this combination of sources, I think, is what makes the book interesting. Is not only things that are available, but also added information by me that was in part already in the recording sessions book. But I mean, it's been harmonized and adapted to the structure of this new book.
Mm-hmm. Okay, why don't we pick a whole bunch of songs to talk about here, and I'm doing this all chronologically.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you a few things that I think I wasn't aware of before. Let's start with the lovely Linda. You write in here that there was a fuller version recorded, perhaps shortly thereafter, and completed with a fragment in mariachi style.
Yeah,
remember where you heard about this?
That's a quote from Paul himself.
Okay.
So he said something like that. I think there was quoted in the accompanying sheets to the McCartney album at the time, something like that, but never appeared. So in the end, probably, who knows if it was recorded or not. So far, we have only this 44 seconds or something like that.
Right.
Which it's a lovely song. No pun intended, but it's a lovely song. I think that even in this short form, it's perfect, because it's the perfect start for his career and for the McCartney album, which I love so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which reminds me that you draw some of your information from what is in the archival box sets from Paul through the years as well.
So. Yes, sure. There's we're waiting for more archive or to know if the series will continue or not. But so far, it's been a great source of information and pictures and stuff. So it's a fantastic project that we have enjoyed so far.
What's your personal opinion on that? Do you think it's going to continue? Because it has been several years now.
Well, I don't really know. What I can tell you from my point of view is that if we think about the two albums that we all are waiting for, which are basically London Town and Back to the Egg, and if we think about not having an archive for London Town, which could include a song like Mall of Kintyre, which is the best-selling single for in Paul's career. It would be strange. On the other side, we have Good Night Tonight, which was another massive hit at the time. So it could, well, you can really write a book on Mall of Kintyre.
Sure.
So it's I don't know. It seemed to me very strange, but who knows? Maybe the plan has changed. Now there's this documentary coming up in 2024, which is focused on the Wings era, if I'm not wrong. Who knows? But I really hope it will continue. For me, it would be a shame, but I can understand that maybe there are new things coming up. There's a lot of work behind an archive collection put together, something like that. It takes quite some time. Finger crossed, let me say.
Yeah.
And let's see what happens.
And you know, Paul gets very involved with these archival box sets.
Yeah.
But yeah, and with little luck was a #1 song, you know, in the United States. So maybe the fact that this documentary is in the works, Man on the Run, will create more of a reason to put out London Town and Back to the Egg. But I want his entire catalog presented this way. So we'll see.
We'll see. I mean, albums like Press to Play or even Broad Street, which is a soundtrack as a special kind of thing, are really interesting projects to follow and for which having an archive. But I mean, let's really wait and see.
Okay. Talk about Every Night. You say that Paul recorded 2 different versions. The first tape with an electric guitar part, and that remains unreleased. Recorded February 22nd, 1970 at Abbey Road Studios.
That's it. Well, there's a description of the tracks by Paul himself, as well in the sheets accompanying the McCartney album at the time. I think they were reproduced in the archive edition as well. And there's an electric guitar part. I can't remember the number of the track now, but there's an electric guitar part which was not used. I would be very, very curious to hear Every Night with a slightly different arrangement. It's one of my favorite songs. I think that it's a great song. I mentioned also a cover by Phoebe Snow in the book, which is maybe, well, it's one of the best covers ever done when we talk about Paul McCartney's solo catalog.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah,
I would suggest anyone who doesn't know this cover to get somewhere and listen to this song, because it's a great cover. Fantastic.
She was an incredible singer with an amazing range. So yeah, I loved her version of Every Night, and she covered Don't Let Me Down too, I think.
Oh, really? No, I didn't know.
Yeah. Also, Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey, Paul said he was influenced by the Teenage Opera by Keith West. He said, I think it was just that one record that made you realize that it didn't have to be the same tempo or the same key all the way through. You can cut like a film. And this was presented in an interview in Drowned in Sound with Paul Draper. So I just love the fact that you have that quote there from Paul.
It's very interesting, because to tell you the truth, I think that this kind of approach can be basically applied to a certain number of songs in Paul's catalog. Well, Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey maybe is a prime example of this technique. But often Paul has got a verse, then it got a chorus and a bridge, and you put together the three. It's not very often, I think. Well, Paul is capable to doing anything, but well, when you write songs, I mean, inspiration happens at any time. So you can be inspired maybe one morning and write a good verse, but then a good chorus maybe comes next month.
Mm-hmm.
The skills of Paul is putting together different pieces, which is really a form of art, because you got to be, you got to understand that this verse goes well with this chorus, and then adding a bridge. It's really a form of art. So I think Paul is number one at doing this.
See, I totally agree with you. I think that there's quite a talent in bridging all these pieces together, and yet there are some people who look at it the exact opposite way, that these are unfinished songs. What am I going to do with them? Let's string them all together. But if they flow together well,
yeah,
which is what Paul's able to do masterfully, that is quite the talent right there.
Yeah, and also the talent is understanding that it's very difficult to be inspired and writing in one go, verse, chorus, and bridge. You don't have to to aim necessarily for this kind of thing when it comes to composing music. Good thing, the thing is that you got to put together all these pieces that maybe after 1 year of writing, you got all these things and you put together these things. But it's not easy. It's not easy to understand what is worth and what you have to erase or not include because it's not good enough. That's another that's another difficult thing to do.
Well, I wanted to bring this up to you because one thing that I've really learned about Paul and his craft, and I've known about this for many years, but it's even more reinforced now when I read a book like yours. There are plenty of songs that he started long before it ever was released. And maybe the composition wasn't finished at the time. A lot is brought up here in your book about the piano tape.
Mm-hmm.
Which was it 1973 or 74 for that?
Well, I think that, yeah, it should be dated 73, but my idea is that who knows that if it was recorded in one go or maybe through months, to various months. At some point, I was it's convinced that could have been a cassette, maybe a cassette recorder, just placed on the piano, on the top of the piano, something like
Right.
that. And when he got an idea, you switch on at some point and he records. So it could be. It's not something I have listened to recently, so I can't remember if the ambience and the vocals is very similar from one song to another. So it was done in one go or not, who knows? But it seems to me quite likely that could have been recorded even through the years and then assembled as a cassette. Who knows? I can understand this because it's something that I have done for years. I mean, I play a bit of guitar, a bit of piano, and so one thing I ever did since I was, I don't know, 18 or something, having a recorder always ready, because when I got an idea, I can tape it immediately, and then maybe next idea comes in 2 weeks or comes in 2 months, and maybe in the meantime, Paul was in this recording studio or on vacation here and there, and maybe this cassette was at Cavendish Avenue. Who knows? But it's interesting.
Okay. Well, it's good that you're playing it safe by saying you don't really know, because really and truly we don't know. But my point is that when you listen to that tape, there's early versions there of Girlfriend, which
Mhm.
it could date as far back as 1972. You've got the Rockestra theme on there. You've got Mull of Kintyre on there. You've got Getting Closer on there. And all these songs came out in 77, 78, 79. So, and then there's the whole process of how he recorded each song, because there could be long gaps from from the moment he started to record. Like there are plenty of times here when you'll see records backing tracks, and then months later he adds something to it. So the whole process of how he works, you get to learn about that more by reading your book and going song by song. And you'll realize that, if you thought that every song that he recorded was written and recorded quickly,
Mhm.
well, there's a mixture. There's so many different ways that he's recorded, but there's quite a number of times when it took him a long time from start to finish with a certain song.
Yeah, with such a catalog and the fact that Paul writes continuously is quite normal. Let me say that it takes time also to finish the songs and to writing. Well, the writing process and the recording process are two different things. So most important for a composer is having ideas and lay down these ideas. Then when it comes to recording studio, you got maybe other musicians that can help you finding the right arrangement. You got a producer or co-producer. Well, in the 70s, Paul produced everything by himself.
Mm.
Well, there's, when you get into the recording studio, there's, you have your sound engineers. There's an environment. There's a team, and so songs can be shaped differently. The important thing is having or being inspired, and Paul is very often inspired.
Mm-hmm.
I would say.
Now, if it just so happens that I forget that any of this is from the archival box sets, it's been a while since I've read them. But for Smile Away,
Mm-hmm.
Eirik Wangberg, one of the engineers, said there were 8 bass tracks on that song.
Yeah, he said that. Well, I don't know why. Maybe Paul recorded and then re-recorded bass tracks, and then I think the main thing on Smile Away about the bass part is that there's this fuzz sound, fuzzing sound,
Fuzzy.
which is very interesting. It gives something to the song. It's a song that I like very much. It's very powerful, and it seems easy to put down this kind of tracks because it's you can say it's a rock and roll song with a 3-chord song, but in the end it doesn't sound like that. I mean, it's very original. It's the vocals and the instrumentation, the backing vocals of Linda. There's a lot of stuff going on, and that's a magic of Paul. You can have a 3-chord rock and roll song, but it sounds different. That's the thing,
That's true. That's what you say about the greatest artists. And even a simple song, in terms of chord progressions, you can make more complicated in the recordings of what you add to it. So Monkberry Moon Delight was written for Screamin' Jay Hawkins. He would only sing it and record it once because he felt it was a drug song. It was also covered by none other than Norman Hurricane Smith, one of the Beatles engineers, same guy that did Oh Babe, What Would You Say, but he did it under a different name, Curtis Mason.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And you can hear all this on YouTube too.
Yeah, there's a lot of cover versions. The Screaming Jay Hawkins one. It's one of my favorite songs, really, because it's so unusual. It's so crazy.
Hmm.
And that vocal. We all know the first time that you hear something like Monkberry Moonlight really, really captures your attention. And if you have some friends which are maybe not that into Paul McCartney, they could not believe it's Paul McCartney.
Hmm.
But Paul is to some people is more tied to maybe to some different vocal style, and this is well, one of the best vocal performances of his career, definitely.
Or by anybody.
Or
When it
by
comes
anybody.
to
Yeah,
comes to screaming vocals, I mean, this is like, oh darling,
yeah,
gone haywire. You know, it's 5.5 minutes continuous of the same vocals.
yeah,
So I don't know how he pulled that off, and he did a lot of takes of that song apparently.
yeah. Apparently, he did 90 takes, something like that. So
Yeah.
who knows? But it makes sense because it's the same technique that he used for "Oh Darling." So doing more and more takes to get that raspy sound in his vocals. So it
Hmm.
could be, yeah.
All right. Eat at Home.
Mm.
You say Paul made a demo. This is the spring, summer of 1970. It's sung as a medley with something called Buddy's Breakfast. And you know that Eat at Home is very Buddy Holly-esque. So I sure would love to hear this, this medley.
Yeah, that's a proof that well, according to the title that is
Hmm.
linked to it at home, it's something that shows that it was a Buddy Holly song in his mind since the beginning.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's another very nice song, very original with all these hiccups and well, in the vocals and something like.
Right.
Well, it's in the end, it's very nice to hear a completely different song because the previous one is Monkberry Moon Delight on the album, and then you got It at Home, so you got two completely different styles of music, of vocals, of arrangement. That's another magic
Hmm.
of Paul.
Indeed. Um, I'll question you on this. The backseat of my car. You hear
Mm.
a similarity in the melody from the Tonight Show theme?
Yeah, I think there's one section which I wouldn't dare to reproduce with my voice. Don't let me don't don't let me sing it. But there's something. I don't know. Maybe we can prepare something in the next occasion and put it aside and side to side and. But yes, I think there's a slight similarity.
Okay. I want to hear what
And
you're hearing. So,
yeah, I can send you something. And
okay.
yeah.
On that
No, it's
same,
another. No, sorry if I interrupt you. It's another thing that I have done through the book, catching these similarities between melodies here and there, which is kind of interesting because uh, composers mainly got to do one major thing, which is listening to a lot of music
hmm,
by other people on the radio and stuff, which is very useful. But sometimes there's something in your brain which you don't know, then it comes out slightly in a slightly different manner, and it's nice to hear or notice or highlight the similarities. Yeah, I
hmm.
think
It's very easy to subconsciously,
yeah, definitely.
copy something and not realize it. What's coming to mind right now, I always like to bring it up, is the song Anyway,
Hmm.
Chaos
Yeah,
and Creation in the Backyard, which as soon as I heard it, it sounded like People Get Ready,
yeah.
and a lot of people pointed that out. So,
And Paul admitted it. So I think he said, yes, that it was inspired by People Get Ready. There's a similarity, but I think it's a normal, it's a part of the process of songwriting. Sometimes it comes out. In the case of Paul, it's well, it's inspiration. It's maybe something like quoting someone else, and he has admitted it. I think it's and it's a great song. Anyway, fantastic.
It's a great album closer.
Yeah,
Definitely. So since you mentioned the similarity there between Backseat of My Car and the Tonight Show theme, at least one part of the Tonight Show theme,
yeah.
you say with Big Barn Bed, the song's intro is identical to that of Oh Darling?
No, it's not. It's not a Big Barn Bed, but there's a section of the song which is very similar to a song which was done by an Australian group, which I can't really remember the name. You got it. If you got the book on,
Okay,
you can
I can look right now. But I know that it was mentioned in the McCartney Legacy that opening line was taken from, well,
yeah, that's it.
Very closely. Okay.
Yeah, that's the opening line. But the similarity with Oh Darling is not connected to Big Barn Bed, but to this other song, which I can't remember the title now. It's 5.11 blah blah man. I can't remember the title, but there's a similarity between this song and the intro of Oh Darling, which is quite a,
Okay.
standard kind of thing. It's not a, well, Big Barn Bed has got some other connection, but with Paul's catalog. So
Yeah. Who's That Coming Around That Corner? Who's That Coming Around That Bend?
Yeah.
Can be found in the song 5'10" Man.
5'10" Man, yes.
That's a single from the Australian band The Masters Apprentices.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is something I discovered by accident many years ago. I can't remember exactly how it happened, but I was searching for something, and this popped up, and yeah, that's who knows if it's a coincidence or not. I don't know.
Okay. So here at the end of your paragraph, it says another quirk is that the song's intro is identical to that of Oh Darling. So you meant the other group.
Yeah, for the song, I meant that 5.10 Men, not Big Barn Bed.
All right. Okay. Just wanted to clear that up. Again, going back to the whole idea that certain songs take several years to finish. My Love, you said, may even date back to 1969. Paul said, written in the early days of our relationship. I mean, we've learned this about a lot of the solo music, not just the Pauls, but a lot of the songs that they released in their solo careers, they started towards the end of the Beatles. So, certain songs like that.
Yeah, this is quite difficult to determine, because he said that early days of our relationships, which, I mean, the relationship between Paul and Linda dates back to the the 60s.
Right.
So if you take this statement, you could also think maybe he was composing, maybe initially, I don't know, maybe a verse or something in 1969, who knows. But then there's another statement that is in the book, for which we can think there's another version, and probably the song was written at the end of 71 or maybe early 72, who knows. So there are conflicting stories about that. So it's not easy even for Paul to remember all of these things. That's why in most of the cases I have preferred to rely on on quotes by Paul, which were, you know, near the recording of the song, more than statements that were done years and years after, because it's not really easy for him to remember everything. He's not studying himself or his composition and the year or the month when it was composed. We do this, but not him.
Now, this is something that I've heard about for many years. Pete Bennett, the guy who did promotion work for Apple, had to convince Paul that My Love was a #1 hit. Now, I also had read in the McCartney Legacy that at the time, Paul was concerned that in the top 10 in the UK, there was a lot of glam rock singles that were making it. So he felt that maybe My Love wouldn't have worked as a single at the time. But that didn't mean he didn't think much of the song, right?
I think I agree with you, Ken. I think it's more connected to this fact. And then the single before My Love was High, 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 which has certain nuances of glam rock, right, in the production style. It's quite similar to the glam rock that was high in the charts at the time. So yeah, I think he knew perfectly that My Love was a classic song, but yeah, maybe with an eye to the charts and to what the audience seemed to like at the time. Maybe he wasn't convinced that was the right moment, but in the end, I'm happy that they put it out in 1973 on Red Rose Speedway. I think it shows that audience at the time liked melodic McCartney as well.
Right.
That's another strength. You go from High, High, High to Sea Moon to My Love in just 3-4 months. And that's another thing that no one else can do.
Right. Well, to me, he's probably the most eclectic music artist we've ever had, and it's one of the many reasons why I admire him so much. And even if you take a look at the Red Rose Speedway, what was proposed as a double album, there were 2 different lineups, but there's so much variety on those 2 albums there, and showcasing the different members, with Denny Lane having a song and Linda having a song. And he's always been that way, going back to the Beatle days. Musically, he's all over the place. So nothing really surprises me, because I just think he's so versatile and adaptable to anything, really. As far as The Mess is concerned, you wrote that it was developed over the course of Wing's first rehearsal with Henry McCullough at the Scotch of St. James Club. Henry said it was written on the spot and we all contributed. And you go on to say it was inspired by the band's The Shape I'm In, which I never thought about until reading your comment there. And there's a similarity, but I guess that's what your ears are telling you.
Yeah, I mean, when I say is inspired or similar to, there are just little hints. Maybe it could be a rhythm thing, could be something. So it's not related to the fact that this song is similar in meaning that it was copied or anything else. There are mutual inspirations between the musicians, and so I'm quite convinced there's something in, and Paul certainly liked that album, that band. So nothing wrong in being inspired by great songs. I mean, it's nice, it's good.
The Beatles certainly loved the band, and certainly something like All Things Must Pass, the song, is proof of that.
Absolutely.
Just nice to point out, even though I think most of us could have figured it out, tragedy. which to me is one of the great unreleased songs, though it was put in the Red Rose Speedway box set. Paul plays the sitar on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You don't think of him, although he can play, I'm sure, just about anything. The sitar is a very difficult instrument to play, you know. So it's just nice to know again that it's here in your book. He is playing it. For Live and Let Die, it seemed like you weren't accepting the story as revealed in the McCartney Legacy of what George Martin has said through the years about meeting Harry Saltzman, the producer, and he had questioned him, so who are we going to get to sing it?
Mm.
And according to what Alan and Adrian discovered, was that he really meant the second version of Live and Let Die, because they already knew that Paul's version was going to be in the film.
No, I mean, the fact is that is not that I am not accepting the version. I think they are right.
Yeah.
The fact is that my book was written and completed before the McCartney Legacy.
Okay.
Then there was a window of time before releasing the book. My book was published on the 22nd of February, so there was a window when you got to fix, you got to to end the book basically. So I just went through the Legacy book, and I have, but before I think I have heard Adrian speaking about that. So I tried to, just to put something in the book. So it's not, for all the rest, where I could, I tried to be aligned with what they discovered. I think this is one of the most difficult thing, especially when it comes to McCartney. So to take in account what has been discovered, and it's a constant rediscovering. It's a big, extensive career. There's a lot of details, a lot of things that maybe Paul has said, someone else has said, then something completely different pops up. The aim is always to present, if possible, all the different versions about one fact or one song or anything,
right.
if there are different sources or different things to say. So I think that I tried to adapt something in the book after I have learned from Adrian what was meant probably in that situation. It's a strange kind of thing, but yeah, who knows how it went? But it makes sense. It makes sense because there are two versions of the song in the film. So I don't know if someone can say, okay, it's a good demo. Live and Let Die. I don't know if it's possible, but let's try to think about what kind of recorder has George Martin with himself in the Caribbean to have the producers listen to the song. Maybe not the best thing in the world. I don't know. So we are accustomed to listen to Live and Let Die, knowing what's in the song,
right,
on a stereo, fantastic thing, and you can hear everything. So who knows? It's hardly you can say it's a good demo. There's an orchestra, there's horns, there's everything in, but it's a strange thing that happened, but it adds something special to the story of that song, which is one of the best he ever wrote. And it's another example of putting together pieces, because if you break down the song,
right,
there are 4 parts at least. So
it's an amazing song. It's an amazing recording. There's a reason why it's become a classic. There's a reason why he does it in every concert, and it is perfect for a James Bond film. which is the ultimate goal. And so, yeah, I just wanted to know what your take was on the whole thing, because I did see you quoting the McCartney Legacy in the book, so I figured you read the whole thing at the stage
Yeah,
when you, yeah,
yeah, it was not easy because it's a quite a lengthy book, and
yeah,
so I try to pick something here and there without spoiling that book, but just putting something that for me was worth adding at that stage of my book. So I think we are quite aligned. But they just, I mean, they just analyzed 4 years,
hmm.
so so we're waiting for the second volume also.
Hey, listen, you know, his career deserves this massive approach.
Yeah.
And you know, I look forward to the next volume and can't wait for your
It
part
would
two.
be it would be out at some point in 2024. Uh, I really don't know if it would be out at the beginning or maybe mid-year. It's in a good state, volume two, but it takes time with some interviews and some additional stuff. So I want to do something that is, you know, comparable to volume one. So
Okay. Just want to bring up one more thing about Live and Let Die.
yeah.
You wrote George Martin's classical background, turned out to be a real ace in the hole. The powerful riff, in fact, was based on a passage from Belshazzar's Feast by Sir William Walton.
Yeah, again, there's a little similarity in the way the riff goes. Well, I was not in the room with Paul and George Martin, so I think that basically the whole song was written, but then when it comes to certain passages and when it comes to a discussion between a composer like Paul McCartney and a arranger, producer with the experience, extensive experience of George Martin, you can do some changes, add in things. So 100% Live and Let Die is Paul McCartney's composition. Then when it comes to certain, you know, passages, I think that could be that George contributed something maybe in the with some ideas, adding something to what was already there, and I can hear some similarities. It's a hint, something like that. You know, it's
Hmm.
nothing bad. I mean, nothing bad.
Yeah. Unless you can pin Paul down and ask him specifically, did George Martin contribute to that part of the, you know, you don't know.
But
So,
generally, they do not go into details, saying, "Oh, I did this bit, you did this bit."
hmm.
It's very difficult because after the thing uh, is done, so the process is it's very difficult to, you know, to be reconstructed after. So you go through the process, you work with an arranger, he contributes and stuff, and then it's very, very difficult to say, oh, it went like this or like that. So, well, I think it's a nice little thing that I have I heard, and I thought it was worth to be put in the book.
Okay. Very, very good. You can't expect Paul to remember every detail about every song he's ever written. So,
No.
you write that Paul, shouldn't shock anybody. Paul didn't want any singles released from Band on the Run.
Mhm.
When you go
I think.
back to the Beatle days,
Mhm.
you know, there were no singles from Sergeant Pepper or the White Album when it first came out.
Yeah, I mean, maybe for the artist himself, at times could be not that easy to choose a single immediately to understand. In the case of Band on the Run, there was Helen Wills that was, you know, released just before Band on the Run. So I think there was quite a lot of pressure. I think that Paul uh, knew there was quite a lot of pressure he went to Lagos. We all know about the recordings of Band on the Run. So when the album was on the market, maybe it was not his first thought, which is a single. But let's see what happens with this album, because maybe he considered it as an album at the time, because he wanted to have a powerful album out there on the market. So I think probably he didn't think about the single. And fortunately, there's a marketing department which is paid for this kind of things. and they just went for Jet, which was a very smart move.
Well, the whole approach of what the Beatles talked about in the 60s, that they didn't want singles to be taken from albums, or, they didn't want the public to have to buy a song twice.
Yeah.
They felt that they would be ripped off. They looked at singles as separate entities, and they had a lot of standalone singles that weren't on albums. So, 1972, you had 3 standalone singles and no album.
Yeah.
And so Paul probably was looking at Band on the Run initially that way. Not every album has to have a single. The first McCartney album didn't have a single, although Maybe I'm Amazed could easily have been a single.
Definitely. Yeah, it makes absolutely sense. But then the market was changing, and so the pressure to have singles and make the whole thing more profitable was there. And so in the end, we all know how it works. I mean, you put out a single, and then all of a sudden, people are hearing the single and they want the album. And so it's a process that works also this way. So you put out 2 songs like Jet and Band on the Run. I mean, these are very strong singles in their own way. So you attract more and more buyers to the album, and that's what happened. So in the end, it was a really nice to have these 2 singles out.
You don't have to tell me. I'm used to the American approach. To me, it all makes sense. The more hits you have on an album, the more the album's going to sell. So
exactly.
And in some ways, it was said quite often with Back to the Egg that it really hurt that Goodnight Tonight was not on the album. If they had a hit record to go with it, it might have sold a lot more. So
yeah, in the case of Back to the Egg, if you want to hear my opinion, I think Goodnight Tonight would have certainly helped Back to the Egg, having more exposure. The only fact is that it's way different, this song, from the rest of the album. So would have been really difficult to put this song on the album, because it's so different. So that's the only thing. But definitely it could have been a nice move in commercial terms. Yeah.
All right. Paul composed Junior's Farm on various occasions. You say the song derived from 2 demos taped by McCartney in the spring of '74, entitled Arab Nights and Little Bassman, parts of which were merged onto one track.
Never heard them.
Yeah.
But well, I can't really remember the exact source for this. It was out for quite some years on some website. So I think it's quite a reliable source. But I never heard these two demos. So we are still waiting.
Okay. Well, Paul had his chance with Venus and Mars, I guess, because Junior's Farm is on there.
Yeah, it's true. We have to consider that we, as fans, we want all. In some cases, maybe for the artist himself. Could be, I don't know, maybe it's not the case. They just hear the demo way back and say, well, it was really just an initial demo, something like that. It's not that easy to put out maybe songs in their initial forms when they were maybe only you know ideas not well developed or something like that. Who knows? So sometimes for the artist himself, maybe he says, well, I don't want this to be published, or released.
I know it's hard to tell because, I think that some of McCartney's archival box sets in recent years have been far more extensive with demos and early versions like Flaming Pie. There's a lot more in Red Rose Speedway than a lot of the other box sets that have come out. So maybe he's thinking, yeah, there's value. People want to hear the earliest versions of these songs, different mixes of songs from Red Rose Speedway and Wildlife, and so who knows what his mindset is right now. It could be changing, from when it started with Band on the Run as far as the archival box sets are concerned. So
yeah, probably each project is considered differently. It depends from the material that's available. Then there are choices to be made, and I think that as you are saying, the project is evolving. So maybe at the beginning you think, okay, let's put out a good book with just a couple of outtakes, and then it goes on, and then you say, well, there's more interesting material from the sessions. Yeah, so let's see.
my gut feeling is that this is never going to end. Because even if Paul goes through his entire album catalog and put out box sets, he can start all over again and add more material. There's a 50th anniversary of Band on the Run this year.
Yes, definitely. Who knows? Who knows? Well, I don't know. A 50th anniversary for Band on the Run, it's a big one. So maybe there's a chance to see something else about the album.
Okay.
I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm always in.
We all need our 20th copy of Band on the Run by now. So
yes.
You say that Paul recorded a version of Let's Love, which is different from the One Hand Clapping documentary at Abbey Road Studios, August 28th of 1974. I always liked the song that he wrote. This was for Peggy Lee. I liked her recording of it, but you did find out that he recorded his own version.
Yeah. That was put, this second version was on the Venus and Mars archive. Yeah, great song. I mean, that's a special atmosphere and stuff. Yeah, typical Paul. Yeah, very nice song.
Let's move on to Venus and Mars. I didn't know that Denny Laine played the sitar.
He played on one song. I can't remember which one was, but
it's on Venus and Mars.
Venus and Mars. Yeah, it's not very clear in the mix, but according to the sheets that are in the Venus and Mars archive, he plays sitar. So
I got to go through these archival box sets more. I mean, I listened to them and I've read them when they first came out, but I need to read them again.
Yeah, the Venus and Mars one is quite interesting because there's basically all the track sheets are in the book, so it's quite nice because it gives you an overview of how the song was arranged and built in the studio. It's very interesting.
All right, about Letting Go. It was written on the piano around 1972 and 73. Jeff Britton is on the drums for the album version. The single mix has Joe English on drums. Or I think you said, or with Britton. Maybe you weren't sure with Letting Go?
Well, Britton should be on the album version, and English and the single. I think they replaced just the drum part there.
No, but I'm saying the single mix, was that Joe English? The
If
single
I'm not
mix
wrong,
was different from
yeah,
the album version.
yeah, it's different. It's different for. There are also a couple of other details. If I'm not wrong, there was an organ part which is more evident in the single mix, and probably fades out earlier compared to the album version.
Right. I
Great
always
song.
like the album version better, but that's just me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a great song. I mean, it's I don't know if you agree. The live version of Letting Go, it's maybe it's better because it's looser compared to the album one.
Hmm.
So I think it's a great live number.
Oh, I agree with you totally. You know, I've always said that that version is better than the version of Venus and Mars, and I love the whole Venus and Mars album. But there are certain songs that really translate well as live recordings. There are some people who probably prefer a lot of Venus and Mars material live or Wings at the Speed of Sound material live. Um, I love both, but I definitely think Letting Go has much more life to it
Mhm.
when it's performed on stage.
Yeah,
That's one of those songs, but you know, I still love the studio recordings too. Um, I just like this quote that you got from Paul about the note you never wrote. He said, I always felt that the tunes Denny was producing weren't really big enough for him, so I wanted to write something that was a bit more epic. So we recorded this track and took it from there with the rest of the group. Denny is really a lead vocalist, and I don't like the idea of me doing all the vocals and Denny just harmonizing. It seems a waste. So, you know, that's proof right there of Paul wanting to establish Wings as a band. There's so many ways that you could say he did that, but certainly at the point of Wings at the Speed of Sound, having every member have a lead vocal, and during the Wings Over America tour, he had Denny sing 5 songs,
yes,
and Jimmy McCulloch um, sang the one with Medicine Jar, and just calling the band Wings and not Paul McCartney and Wings at that point, once he'd had all the success
yeah,
with Band on the Run, every album became just Wings. So it drives home the whole point right there and how much he wanted other members to contribute. And he thought highly enough of Denny to write a song that Denny himself would sing lead on.
yeah. I think that at that point, Paul was at the peak of his confidence, and so yeah, as we all know, the Wings of America tour was really big, and Wings were really well established as a band, as a group. It's a shame that after a while they just broke. I mean, broke in the sense that Joe English and Jimmy McCulloch left the band because it was definitely the best configuration of Wings ever.
Hmm.
Also because they had the chance to go on a US tour. So who knows if the last Wings configuration with Steve Holley and Lawrence Juber uh, would have had the same opportunity. So to tour extensively
Hmm.
didn't happen. So unfortunately, we have to say if at this point.
There's a lot of ifs. And the whole Beatles story, and if you're just talking about Paul, there's a lot of ifs. But you know, I've grown to love all the different lineups of Wings, and especially spending a lot of time with the early McCartney music and really loving Denny Seiwell's drumming quite
Oh
a
yeah,
lot. Um, and Henry's guitar playing too. I like all the lineups. It's really difficult to say, you know, what if Henry and Denny didn't leave Wings and they continued? And that was the band that toured America in 76.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, this different lineups are very different to each other in style, and so interesting because Danny Sywell is a fantastic drummer. Henry McAuliffe was an incredible blues guitar player. I don't know if maybe this fact that he was really a blues guitar player was really that suitable to McCartney's music, especially in the studio, but also to some extent live, because we all know that Paul's music requires a certain amount of, let me say, discipline, and there's no room for this improvisation on stage and stuff. So it's a different kind of approach. But it certainly in the first Wings tour, Henry got the opportunity to shine with his solos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think in some ways, as much as I think it's a shame that the first two, well, if not counting Jeff Britton, but the first two major lineups, that the fourth and fifth members left, but at the same time it kept Wings interesting by having new members join to what each one brought. To me, I can tell the difference easily between Denny Sywell, Joe English, and Steve Holley as a drummer. Just from listening to the drum parts, I can tell the difference between Henry McCullough, Jimmy McCulloch, and Lawrence Juber as lead guitar players. They're all very different, and they're all great in their own way. And they all worked very well for whatever Paul was coming up with and what the other members wanted to contribute. So
definitely,
I don't know.
Definitely, I think that it's not. I think Paul was great in doing all these things, because I think that he had the feeling that each member of Wings could contribute in a very special way, and it was perfect for that particular stage of Wings. I think that it's not easy when you put together a group to understand the characteristics of your members, not in technical terms, but personality, character, all these kind of things are a vital part when you're talking about a band, musical band. It's not only the technical skills. It's not.
And when you follow the whole history of Wings, it's very apparent to me that Paul wanted the band to be recognized as a band and not just his backup musicians, and all the efforts he put behind that. So yeah, and that's certainly you look at the whole history of Wings, and you could say that on their albums, it less so towards the end of Wings, but I mean, Wings at the Speed of Sound. What more can you say? Every band member got a lead vocal.
Yeah.
Linda got a lead vocal. Everyone did. So, all right. Silly love songs. I found it interesting that the horn parts were really a last-minute addition. When you consider, yes, I know it's one of the great bass lines in Paul's career, but the horn parts are so essential. I can't imagine the song without it, really. So, and the last touch were the strings, which were arranged by Tony Dorsey. So,
yeah,
enjoyed learning about that.
No, I mean it's always a discovery with Paul, and then when it comes to arrangement and stuff, there's so much in a song like "Silly Love Songs." I mean, there's a harmony which is basically very similar throughout the whole song, but then you got that bass part, that horn arrangement, those strings, those vocals, some backing vocals. There's so much there, and it's very powerful and unique, the way Paul conceives the arrangement of a song, because when it comes to Wings, for example, in this case, you got there's no room for Jimmy McCulloch in this song. Basically, there's no guitar. But that's another strength of Paul, because when he thinks about a song, he thinks about the song. The focus is on the song, and not necessarily on the instrumentation or a standard instrumentation, because you got, I don't know, 2 guitarists, and so you have to put in 2 guitars. It doesn't work like that with Paul. With Paul's music, it works completely different. So the focus is always the song. Then the group should be ready to adapt. And if you have to play bass because Paul is on piano, you have to play bass in a certain way. If you have to add another instrument, you contribute another instrument. That's not common with the majority of the band. And Wings was special also for this aspect, I think.
Oh yeah, that's, you know, Paul, you're touching on something else where Paul's talents are concerned, is that he's such a skilled arranger, you know, of all of his music. You know, he has a really good ear for what works in a song, although he takes ideas from other people. There's no doubt about it. And, you know, from talking to various members of Wings through the years, you know, they've told me that. There are times when he has very definite ideas of what he wants, and there are times when he accepts ideas from other musicians. So, you know, that's part of collaborating.
Yeah, it's a very smart thing, because the songs are all different. So the fact that such a composer is capable to understand, as you were saying, when he wants something in a very definite way, and when having other people contributing maybe more, it's not easy to do. It's not easy to do. We are talking about this as it was easy, but it's not easy to understand. When it's the case A or case B, it's not easy to understand it.
Every song is different in the way that it's handled. So, Warm and Beautiful, initially planned as a double A-sided single with Silly Love Songs, which I didn't know. EMI even pressed an acetate before the idea was put aside.
Yeah, that's it. It's quite. It would have been quite an unusual choice, maybe, but I think there's a quote from Paul himself about it. And it says, well, also Yesterday was not necessarily a single material, but I think it's in the same vein or something like that. So yeah, it's quite interesting to know what Paul thought about his songs, as we were saying before, for Band on the Run and the singles. I think what's in the mind of the artist maybe it's a little bit different from what's in the mind of a marketing person. And so sometimes the two things are very easy to understand and to detect. In some other cases, maybe there are different ideas. It's part of the story. It was nice to put also this kind of little unknown or lesser known facts.
Yeah, well, I've always loved that song. It's one of his many great ballads. Would have loved for that to have been a double-sided hit. So for all the hits that Paul had, he could have had so many more. Really, just my opinion here. There's one thing I have to disagree with you on. Wings Over America, you say, was the final chapter in Wings' career. The inclusion of 5 Beatle classics in the concert set list for the first time since the breakup of the group emphasized that Paul was the record's common denominator. I think he wanted Wings to continue. There's no doubt about it. I don't think he knew that Jimmy was going to leave and that Joe was going to leave. And the mere fact that, as we were just saying, he's presenting Wings on tour with 5 songs that Denny Lane sang lead to, and Jimmy got a song, you know. For the longest time, I think he wanted Wings to be recognized as a band. So, you know, what he accomplished in 1976 and 75 around the world was, you know, a great accomplishment. The albums were doing well. The tour was sell out everywhere. But I don't think it was the final chapter.
No, I can explain better what I mean for final chapter.
Okay.
We have to consider that even though it's an historical book, or kind of an historical book that tries to put everything in perspective, then when we comment something now, we are conditioned to some extent to what happened, and we know that what happened after. So if we look now back to Wings' career and Paul's career, we can have our assessments and our feelings and stuff. So definitely that was the peak moment. The Wings of America was a peak moment. After, it could have been different. Story could not be done with if, as we said before. So that was the peak. Final chapter to me means that it's more connected to the fact that when Paul decided to have finally 5 Beatles songs in the set list, that meant something big. So Wings were at the peak as a band, as you were saying, but at the same time, Paul had to say, okay, now I'm going to do the Beatles stuff. I cannot delay this moment no more. So the fact that these 2 things together, for a number of facts that in the end meant something. Also for Wings, then probably it's a combination of things, but because after Wings Over America, there was the London Town. That was a quieter album. Linda having another baby. So there was something different in Paul's mind. Then there was Joe English going out, Jim McCullough going out. So then putting together again, the band was not easy for him. So I think it adds some more, you know, I don't know the word to use here, but you know, it's difficult. It was difficult, a little bit more difficult for him to go back again and refounding the band again. And was 1978, 79, and the musical scene was so different, was so different. I think that Paul could have been a little bit concerned about what was good for him to do, and so he tried to push Wings as with a more aggressive image, with a more aggressive style of music, which made sense. And then, you know, Japan thing was the last word. But what I mean is that the final chapter is in insight. Now I can say it was a final chapter, not because he knew that was a final chapter, but because this peak was a really an incredible peak. And then what happened after, there was a different things that unfortunately, I mean, meant that Wings were in a different kind of, in a different part of the career, of the path to me. So it's undeniable that after Wings of America, there's something different. Well, I mean, London Town, Back to the Egg, for me, two great albums. I mean, no doubt about it. But it's a different thing, and I think that Paul, well, it's my take. I mean, I'm not in his mind, or I don't know what really happened, but I don't know what happened, because we all know the facts. But that peak was so high, Ken. That peak was so high. That was my that was my feeling. Was really, really high peak.
Okay, I understand your point of view. Parts of it, I might agree with, but at the same time, I still think that for London Town and Back to the Egg, Paul was concerned about the sales and still tried to promote it. He still had Mull of Kintyre, I mean, you're talking about the biggest selling single up to that point in the UK, even though Capitol decided not to promote that here in the United States. It was not only such a monstrous hit in the UK, it was worldwide, so, and the name on the record was Wings. So I understand what you're saying about, Jimmy and Joe leaving, and I think that kind of, let the air out of the bag in some ways. And Paul had to feel like he had to start over with Wings and introduce two more members. And, I understand what you're saying there. But at the same time, I don't think Paul really knew ahead of time what was going to happen with the group. I don't think he knew once the drug bust happened in Japan that was the end of Wings. Depending upon what story you believe about Tug of War, but George Martin didn't want he didn't want it to be a Wings album. That could have been a massive contributing factor as to why Wings ended. We don't really know. And I don't even think Paul can explain it, because I'm sure he had conflicting emotions at that time about what to do.
We have to say one very strange thing about that final chapter of Wings, because there was no official announcement. Basically, there was the announcement of Denny Laine quitting Wings, but there's no official announcement of Wings are no more. It was never said. So it was difficult, I think, also for Paul to understand. Okay, I want solo career again. Okay, what I'm going to do with the rest of the group. So no official announcement about Wings ending. So that's that's it.
So maybe he wasn't sure about Wings ending.
He wasn't.
And Denny still worked with him on Tug of War and Pipes of Peace.
Yeah, we got to say that credit on Pipes of Peace is quite. We got to understand that Pipes of Peace was recorded. Basically, some songs were recorded 2 years before. So the last sessions with Denny Laine and Paul was, I think, were in Montserrat. So after that, they didn't contribute to anything. So 81 is the last year that Denny contributed to some songs with Paul.
Right.
So the fact that it's credited in Pipes of Peace is just a fact that they just retain some parts of the recordings from the Tug of War sessions. But anyway, it's strange when you're not putting out an announcement. Wings are no more. There's no announcement. So yeah, the last part of Wings was quite strange. Quite strange. Yeah, a lot of things happened.
Okay. About London Town, you wrote that for the album, it's one of the most adventurous McCartney records, combining both folk and experimentation, which provoked his interest in electronic music. Just trying to get your opinion on things here, because we were just discussing Goodnight Tonight and just the fact that Paul is so adaptable to every genre of music, and that's one of the many reasons to admire him. I get the feeling sometimes maybe you admire him more when he's not trying to cash in on the latest trends, you know, which you talk about 1979 with Goodnight Tonight, and then Back to the Egg with some punk, if you want to call it that. You know, which route do you prefer him going? Him sticking what you feel are his real roots, or, you know, just experimenting and doing whatever he feels like, regardless of whether it's the current trend of the moment? Your opinion.
No, my opinion is very clear. I don't have a choice because I like everything he does. No, but in the best sense. I mean, I like Paul when he's, let me say this, even when it's blatantly commercial. I don't care. I mean, it's not easy to put out a song which is commercial. It's not a bad word. A commercial, it's a for me at least, it's a very good word.
Yeah.
You know. No,
I agree.
And then on the other side is capable to be experimental and to do you know, avant-garde things and stuff, and putting all these strange things in arrangements and stuff. So I cannot choose Can, really. It's the fact for me, I was fascinated by this music precisely because it's so different from one song to another, as we were saying before. And so I do not have a preferred side of McCartney. I see what you mean, but in the end, I gotta take all, you know. So that's the best thing. Maybe it's a matter of being in the mood. Sometimes I'm in the mood of pop McCartney. Sometimes I'm in the mood of experimental McCartney. Other times I'm in the mood of jazzy McCartney, and that's it. I mean, the secret is that this kind of music and this kind of different approaches can help you going through your different moods. And we all know that the moods are different from one day to another, from 1 month to another, from 1 year, from one season of our life to another. So it's this year for me is, I'm 53, and this year for me is 40 years, exactly 40 years of Paul McCartney's music. So I went through different eras in my life, and Paul always with Paul always with me, and his music always with me, and so it's good to have all these different moods because they apply perfectly to my different moods.
It's beautifully put, you know, and I'm very much the same way. I like the fact that he tries everything, you know. He puts his toe in the water with so many different things. I like exploring his classical music. I like when he does the fireman stuff, you know. He's someone that you really can't say he's one type of artist, or he's one of those artists that just does ballads and rockers, you know. There's so many things that he's done, and that's what's kept it interesting for me personally. But I think you applaud him very much for doing something like London Town in the face of the whole disco era, you know, because the biggest reason why London Town didn't make #1 is because of Saturday Night Fever, you know, and just how gigantic the movie and the soundtrack was. So he didn't try to jump on the disco bandwagon, even though some people think of Silly Love Songs as disco. And I know Lawrence Juber has told me a number of times Goodnight Tonight is not disco.
Yeah.
Then, you know, that's how he interprets it as a musician, who we have to respect because he's done so many different styles of music, and as a studio musician too. He doesn't think it's disco. It's a dance song, but it's not disco.
Yeah.
But you know, and there are those who feel like, oh, he's really trying to cash in when he's doing something like Good Night Tonight, or even though I think it was a lot more acceptable for people when he did Spin It On and Old Siamster, because they're rockers, albeit if you want to call it punk, but if you love him as a rocker, that's easier to accept. But to me, he's just all over the place, and that's what keeps him the fascinating artist that he is to me. And like you said, you know, there's so many different albums that he's made, so many different styles, that I'm always in the mood to hear one album
Mhm.
of his. One day I might be more in a press to play mood. One day I might be more in a Ram mood. You know, they're very different albums. So,
Well, the claim, the perfect claim with Paul is expect the unexpected,
hmm,
and that's what makes him great, because once you know that he's got an album out, you don't really know what to expect. You only know that it's going to be different from the previous one,
hmm,
and that's, as you were saying, that's what makes Paul so interesting even these days. I mean, it's incredible.
right. I remember
That's
when McCartney 3 was announced, and we were wondering, is it going to be like McCartney or McCartney 2? And what's more likely to happen? So that's the fun part of not knowing what to expect with him. Um, I want to mention Morse Moose and the Grey Goose, which is a favorite of mine. I love the wacky side of Paul. Um, Paul said it was a mad track. We made it up in the studio on the boat. It's really a combination of two songs, Grey Goose being another song more in the folk tradition that he
Mhm.
worked on with Denny Lane. But there's another case of, you know, there are certain songs that he just creates in the studio, like what we're
Mhm.
talking about with The Mess
Mhm.
or The Fireman, you know, Electric
Yeah.
Arguments, you know, very spontaneous, create from scratch. And,
Mhm.
you know, I love that side of him too. Morse Moose and the Grey Goose is another example of that.
Definitely, definitely one of my favorites too. There's no, as he said, summing up, I think London Town. There's no formula. That's the thing, you know. With Paul's music, there's no formula. Could
Hmm.
be improvised, could be well thought, could be well structured, could be just one chord, be anything.
I know. I know. Let's talk about just a few songs from Back to the Egg here. I found it interesting that Getting Closer was originally sung as a duet
Yeah,
between Paul and Denny Lane.
yeah.
I've
There's
heard the bootleg of Denny singing it.
only there. Well, I think I can't remember now because it's many years. I don't listen to this version. I think there was some. Well, mainly, yeah, maybe you're right. Mainly was sung by Danny.
Hmm,
Maybe some parts were Paul joining.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was not maybe only Danny, mainly Danny, something
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't think of it as a duet in that sense, but
Yeah, yeah. This was kind of a stretch.
okay. Old Siamser was born out of a 1976 demo called Super Big Heat Wave.
Mhm.
Where'd
Yeah.
you find that out?
Oh no, that was it was out with this. I think this was the title that some bootleggers got because it was said at the beginning of the tape. So the tape starts uh, with these words,
Okay.
and so probably it was just a way to identify this. It was not really a song at the time, but just a jam. You know,
Hmm.
it evolved from a jam, and so that was the initial title, supposed to be the title,
Okay.
but in a in a moment where the song was not there yet.
I know Steve Holley contributed a little bit in the composition.
Yeah.
There's a break in the song, an instrumental
Mm.
break, which I believe is his part.
Yes.
And finally, Arrow Through Me. Aside from the horns, it's just Paul and Steve Holley.
Mhm.
That's it. Paul plays almost everything. Electric piano, clavinet, the Moog, and Steve Holley drums and flexitone.
Yes.
I found that fascinating because you think of the video too, and the whole band is there. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the typical of Paul is that I think that probably that day Lawrence Juber was, and Danny had a day off, something like that, for some reason, and so he was in the studio with Steve Holley, and they made a track. So you know, it's another it's another peculiar thing with Paul's music. That day he wanted to record, so he laid down all the keyboards,
Mm.
had the drummer backing up, and that's it. And what can we say about this song? It's it's an incredible one. It's an incredible one.
It's an amazing melody and very tough to sing.
Very tough to sing, and also the keyboard parts are not that easy. It's reminds me, and as I wrote in the book, reminds me something of Stevie Wonder in the atmosphere. There's something, something that reminds me of Stevie, which is a great thing.
That could only be a good thing.
Yes.
All right. Before we close, you did a lot of interviews yourself for this book. Who did you find to be perhaps the most fascinating people that you've interviewed in your research for this?
Are you talking about the content or the approach or the interaction that I had with this
In terms of the content of what you learned about Paul and his craft.
well, let me mention maybe not one but a couple. One which is quite recent, and that was done with this assistant sound engineer, which is Tom Anderson, which worked on London Town, because he had an incredible amount of details about the recordings, and so it's very interesting because it's the first time that these details are out in a printed form. And I think it's fascinating for all the fans to discover something more. There are technical details, but not too technical. They can be understood by anyone. So definitely this is something I like very much. And then among the others, well, let me think, because there are many. Well, I've interviewed Danny Sywell, who had a good memory. I mean, it's not easy for us. Is Ram, is Paul McCartney. For him, is just, 1 month in the studio.
Right.
Well, with Paul McCartney, but it's not that easy to go back that far. And then, well, I think interesting it was Lawrence Juber as well, as we are talking about Back to the Egg. Lawrence Juber gave me a lot of details. He also wrote this incredible book, Guitar with Wings, which is worth a mention. So it was very kind. It was very available to answer all of my crazy questions. And also, I think one of the greatest thing that a musician can do in these cases, when you're working with someone with Paul McCartney, is taking notes and having a diary, a little diary. Otherwise, after a while, you start forgetting things, and if you understand, as he understood, that you are part of a musical history which will remain in decades, then it's worth writing down your notes.
Yeah. No, I know, in the case of Denny Sywell and his wife Monique, they kept diaries. Thank God. They did, because
Yeah, definitely.
that certainly helped out the McCartney
And
Legacy book. Yeah.
the last one I want to mention is Tony Clark,
Hmm.
because Tony Clark became a friend of mine, and I visited him last year in London twice, and he made me understand better, way better, what really Paul did with Wildlife, with this kind of album. He said it was really a brave kind of move to just, gather three other people, going into Abbey Road, calling Tony Clark as an engineer, and bam, doing the album.
Hmm.
It's what we, after the Beatles, the first album with a band, established band,
Right.
official band, after the Beatles. It could have done something completely different, something with ballads, orchestras, and stuff. It could have done everything.
Hmm.
It chose to do something very basic in spots, very raw, very natural. And so Tony made me understand better and better what Wildlife meant for him and
Hmm.
for Paul. So it was a fascinating conversation I had with him way back. And each time we see each other, he's very fond of Dear Friend.
Hmm.
He gets emotional when they listen to the songs, and this incredible, things that come out from this song. So yeah,
All right.
definitely I want to mention Tony, because as a human relationship, and so we didn't speak only about Paul as a musician, but also as a man, and everything that was uh, in the studio during these days for that album that meant really much for him and for Paul.
And I love all the quotes from all the people that you interviewed here in the book. And I got to tell you, Denny Sywell and Lawrence Huber are two of the finest people I've interviewed. They have incredible memories. And when you think about it, let's not take it for granted. What Denny Sywell went through is 50 years ago. It's still
Yeah.
a long time ago. And yeah, it's a great thing that he kept a diary as his wife did.
Yes.
And Lawrence has an incredible memory too. Two really nice guys. And yeah, and I'm probably going to be interviewing Denny tomorrow.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
on
nice.
one of my podcast shows. So yeah, this has been tremendous talking to you here, and continued success with this book. You said your goal for the follow-up is next year, around when, possibly?
It's hard to tell, but I think within the first half of 2024.
Okay. How
Yeah.
close are you to finishing it yourself?
Well, let's put a percentage. I think it's ready for 70%. But now it comes, additional parts which are hard to do, because you got to harmonize everything. Adding interviews, I got a couple of things, very interesting things about a couple of albums that are not well not well explored so far.
Hmm.
And so it will take time, but as I told you, I want a second volume to be possibly as exciting as the first one. So that's why I'm taking my time, and then I'm working on the well, next week. Volume 2 will be out in Italian, but the English edition will be way more detailed because of timing also. So
Right.
there will be additional things. So yeah.
Now the next book takes you all the way up till today.
Yeah. And the last part of this project would be a volume 3, let me call it volume 3, about the collaborations. So everything that is not in the official discography of McCartney, so the McGear thing and everything else that Paul took part, will be in a separate volume. So then we will have 3 books with everything in.
Got to cover it all.
Yes. Let's see what happens this year, because now I'm publishing my Italian book, volume 2, that ends in 2022. But in English, it would be at least until 2023. Maybe we will get a new album. Who knows?
I got my fingers crossed.
Yes.
More than anything, I'm just curious about It's a Wonderful Life and whether or not that's actually going to come out. So
yeah, I
we'll
don't
have to
know
wait and see.
if Paul is going to sing these songs or only writing these songs. Probably the second option, I don't know. There's also High in the Clouds,
Yes.
who could be out at some point this year. So there's a lot of stuff, huh?
It never ends.
No,
That's,
it never ends. Never
you
ends.
know,
But Paul was always very clear about it. I'll never stop doing music, and that's what is happening. Thanks God.
We're so much better for that. I'm all choked up. Luca, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks to you, Ken. Thanks to you a lot.
Continued success with the book. Paul McCartney, you talk.
I talk Paul McCartney, Music is Ideas, Stories Behind the Songs, Volume 1, 1970, 1989. Thanks again for your time with me and for this episode again.
Thank you, Luca.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for watching.
Bye.
We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.